People are starting to recognize that burnout is not just an individual issue. It's a leadership issue. It's an organizational issue. Burnout is costing American companies about $190 billion a year. And people in my generation, this wasn't important. And that's causing a little bit of friction in the workplace. You still have people in my generation that are leading organizations, but guess who they're managing? Guess who they're leading? The millennials.
Exactly. You're listening to the TJ Moore Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Reggie Thomas from Chino Hills, California. He's a professional speaker and best-selling author of the books People Pains and Burnout Pains. He's the founder of Peak Potential, Inc., and his workshops and keynotes address burnout prevention and recovery along with employee wellness. He has ran 44 marathons and 6 ultra marathons. He has also ran the Boston Marathon 12 times. I'll ask more about these experiences later in this episode. Reggie, thanks for joining me.
TJ, thanks for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
I want to start with this. A study from 2018 found after surveying 1,000 U.S. full-time employees that 77% felt burnt out. So I want to start by getting your perspective on this. What are some of the symptoms that people should look for to know that they're dealing with burnout?
So first of all, TJ, that statistic that you just read is consistent with the research that I've done on burnout. I've looked at a number of research sources, and that seems to be kind of the aggregate. You know, there's some statistics that are maybe a little bit lower. I saw one that was as high as 85%. There's really 3 categories of burnout symptoms. There's what I call the physical, and then there's the emotional, and then there's behavioral. And I'll briefly unpack those just in a few minutes. But one of the things that I think is really confusing about people when it comes to burnout is they don't know the difference between just the normal day-to-day stress versus burnout. And it's important to be able to do that because all of us, 100% of us, we go through times in our life and in our careers where we just get tired, we're drained, and all we need then is just a simple vacation or some type of recreation just to kind of pull us through it. But burnout is a little deeper than that. And so when you look at those particular symptoms, like physical, burnout is not a physical syndrome, it's an emotional syndrome, but there are physical symptoms and signs. My biggest sign, I actually went through burnout myself, which is why I have a passion for helping people with it. But my biggest physical symptom was insomnia. I could not sleep. I had a hard time getting to sleep. If I got to sleep, I would wake up in the middle of the night and couldn't get back to sleep. The burnout syndrome was so deep in me that I couldn't sleep at night. There are other symptoms like headaches, constant headaches, gastrointestinal symptoms, and then the emotional symptoms is you just feel depleted. You feel exhausted and you feel demoralized. You don't want to go to work. And then the behavioral symptoms are more personality based. My primary emotional symptom was Sunday nights when it was time to get ready to go back to work. I dreaded going to bed because I knew that the next day I had to go to this job that I did not want to go back to. That's burnout. That's not just being tired.
It's called the Sunday scaries.
Yes. And then I think I shared with you before we came on the podcast that I'm an off the chart extrovert. My behavioral symptom was I was isolated. You know, I isolated myself. I didn't want to be around people. I remember, when I was in burnout, I worked about 2 miles from my house. And I've always had this habit and pattern of going to lunch with people during the day. But during my burnout period, which lasted about 18 months, I came home almost every day just to get away from people, to recharge, and just to isolate myself. I didn't want to be around people. The way you know that you're in burnout is you're probably going to be showing signs in all 3 categories: physical, behavioral, and emotional.
You've written that burnout is not a weakness or failure. It's a red flag, a warning sign that something must change. So what were the first warning signs that you were ignoring when you were dealing with this for the first time?
I was in my former career 30 plus years, And I had gone through seasons where, I'd get tired, I'd get emotionally exhausted, and then I'd go on a 1 week vacation or a 2 week vacation, come back refreshed. The first couple of times I went away on vacation after having these feelings of burnout, I was surprised. I'm thinking to myself, this is really different, because in the past, I'd go on a nice vacation, come back, man, I'm energized, I'm ready to go back to work. But I didn't feel that way the first couple of vacations I took. There were a couple of things. Number one, I was just in the wrong environment. A lot of people think that burnout is only the individual things that you do, like not setting boundaries, not engaging in self-care, not taking care of yourself. That is a huge part of what causes burnout, but also there's your culture as well. And so I was working in kind of a toxic staff culture. I was the number 2 person. I was in charge of the staff. And so I had to deal with a lot of conflict, had to deal with a lot of drama. And man, that wears on you when you're dealing with that kind of stuff every single day. I pretty much took care of myself. I mean, as you mentioned, I'm a marathon runner, so I exercise, I eat healthy. I think my internal burnout cause was my personality type. I'm a type A personality. And the research shows that type A's burn out faster than type B's, because we're perfectionists, we're drivers, we push ourselves, we push other people. Nothing is ever good enough. And so after time, that just kind of wears on you.
And I can relate to that so much personally, because we also put pressure on ourselves where we're setting expectations for the future, whether it's numbers or it doesn't have to be a quantity of something. It can just be an opportunity that you're aiming for. But if it takes longer than you thought it would, or it takes more time, money, effort, investment than you thought it would, then it can start to feel like you're not getting there fast enough. And you've called the feeling of burnout insidious, meaning that it slowly creeps up on you and it builds through the process of chronic stress, blurred boundaries, and this relentless pressure that we're talking about. So what are some examples that you've seen in the stories from clients and audience members about how it affected them like it did for you with insomnia?
Yeah, so I like that terminology, that it's insidious. And what that means to me, TJ, is that burnout doesn't shout, it whispers. You don't just wake up one day and you're in burnout. It's a gradual build up. It builds up simply because they ignore it. And they not only ignore it, but they refuse to address it. If you don't know anything about burnout, or you go through it for the very first time, and I do believe that you can go through it more than once. I mean, in the back of my book, the end of my book, I talk about what is called the relapse syndrome. 50% of the people that go through burnout, after they recover, within 1 year, they're back in burnout. And my theory on that is they didn't make the necessary changes. It's insidious because a lot of people think, oh, I can get over this. I can shake it off. I've been through pressure before. I handle anxiety really well. And there are some people that are more resilient than others. But listen, man, burnout is a different monster. And I think that's the problem. People go in with this naive mindset. Oh, yeah, I'm burned out, but I can beat it. I can take a little brief vacation or a little bit of time off and I'll be back to normal. They might feel better when they take a little time off, but if they don't change something internally and externally, they really haven't solved the problem.
So besides vacation or quitting a job or taking a lot of time off or changing even your schedule, what are some daily routines that people can do to improve their own relationship with stress and the feeling of burnout once they've identified that's what's going on?
One of the statements that I use in my book is to stop the slide. Burnout, it's a gradual, slippery slope, and you got to stop the slide. Now, in my case, when I made the decision to stop the slide, I was already in chronic burnout. I wasn't in mild burnout. Okay. So let me start there and then back up to answer the question. If you're in chronic burnout, you're probably going to need to do something more drastic. I had to take a 10-week leave of absence and do a lot of reflection, had to do a lot of recalibration, did a lot of processing. And I actually recalibrated my life during that time. Now, for somebody that's in more of a mild form of burnout or even a moderate form of burnout, They may not necessarily need to do what I did. They might need to take some time off. And by the way, I do believe that the first thing to recovery is rest. One of the analogies that I use in this, TJ, is a flat tire. If you get a flat tire, you don't keep driving on it. You have to, stop the car, get out, either call AAA like I do, or, change the tire yourself. But you can't keep running on that flat tire. You keep running on the flat tire, you're going to ruin the suspension system and some of the other internal systems of the car. You have to stop and fix the flat tire. Burnout is like a flat tire. You got to stop, whether that's taking 2 weeks off or 10 weeks off like I did. You got to take some time off to kind of recalibrate. That's where it starts. Some of the things that I think you need to change is, your schedule. You need to start paying attention to self-care. I mean, it's amazing how people neglect self-care. They don't exercise, they don't eat, they don't pay attention to their sleep. They don't have a healthy social life because they're so driven by their work. I mean, those are the kind of things that you got to start doing. I call it balancing your life. The analogy that I use is called faceting, and it's a diamond term. And if you notice, some diamonds, they sparkle more than others. And that has to do with the cut of the diamond. And the more cuts a diamond has, the more it sparkles. And I always tell people you need a lot of cuts in your life. You've got to pay attention to your physical, your emotional, your social, your financial, your spiritual, all aspects of your life, your recreational. You pay attention to all of those things, you're going to thrive. So you've got to bring life and work balance together, self-care, and then, of course, boundaries. That's where you want to start.
I've heard the actor Jim Carrey discuss depression as you need deep rest. It's his way of trying to get people to understand, let's break down, how do you get out of depression? You must start with rest. You need deep rest. That always comes to my mind whenever I'm in a place of feeling ultra low or depressed, is I actually need to take the time and get extra rest to get back to sort of a normal state. So a statistic that you've given your presentations is that 64% of companies say retaining employees is harder than hiring them. What are some of the negative side effects of burnout on teams and productivity for companies?
People are starting to recognize that burnout is not just an individual issue. It's a leadership issue. It's an organizational issue. Burnout is costing American companies about $190 billion a year. The reason for that is people, when they go through burnout, they need more time off. It affects the company's healthcare costs. It affects the bottom line. People are not as productive, and so the company doesn't make money. It affects the culture of the organization. When people are not feeling good emotionally, they're not good employees. They might show up to work, but they're not engaged employees. They just kind of go through the motion. So it is a huge organizational and leadership issue. And that's why I like to encourage HR directors, HR managers, HR professionals, CEOs, team leaders to really care about their employees. And by the way, wellness is no longer something that is leisurely. It should be an organizational priority. And the millennial generation, that's what they're looking for. They're looking to work for companies that's going to care about them holistically, not just what they bring to the company. So they're looking to work for companies where they feel like that the leadership cares about them and cares about their well-being. If companies are going to thrive, and if they're going to hire good employees and retain good employees, there has to be a priority and focus on wellness.
And what are some of the mistakes that you have seen organizations or companies do to address burnout?
They don't deal with the psychology of management. One of my favorite authors is an author by the name of Will Schutz. And Will Schutz, he wrote a book called The Human Element. And he said that people, and he applies this to the workforce, but he said people have three basic needs. They have a need to belong, they have a need for control, and they have a need for empathy. And TJ, that's what great leaders do. They care about their team members by making them feel that sense of belongingness. They make their team members feel connected by giving them a sense of autonomy and control of their work. They don't micromanage them. They hold them accountable and they support them, but they don't micromanage them, which is a huge cause of cultural burnout, is when you feel micromanaged. You don't have control over your work. And then really good leaders, they know how to show empathy. That's what companies need to really focus on now, is meeting those basic emotional needs of their employees. Now, let's just face it. I mean, I'm a baby boomer, and people in my generation, this wasn't important. And that's causing a little bit of friction in the workplace. You still have people in my generation that are leading organizations, but guess who they're managing? Guess who they're leading? The millennials.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're managing the millennials. And the millennials are saying, hey, I need you to care about me. I need a boss that's going to care about me. And the guys that are my age leading these companies, they're like, you know what? I showed up to work every day. I never missed a day. I never got sick. I showed up whether I liked my boss or not. Hey, that was that generation. We're in a new day now. And leaders need to lead differently.
Some of the standards have gone up like drastically in the last, 30, 40 years. The people that were involved in those times are often still involved in some of the same company structures. They've even moved up. So they're the ones that are making those decisions now. And then they're trying to hire people. And then the expectations of the newer people are at a higher level than sometimes they can keep up with. I was just talking about all of this. I interviewed last week Chase Sterling. She's the founder and director of Wellbeing Think Tank.
Oh, yeah. I know Chase.
Yeah. She brought up the need for belonging. And we also talked about ageism. Different generations perceive the needs. And even there can be an element of pride of, well, we made it through without all of these tools. So why do we need these tools when we lived without them? So some of it's an issue of not really wanting to expand. If there's something that you could personally change about workplace culture, what would it be?
I would embrace flexibility. I like the hybrid approach, allowing people to have maybe 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. I think the research shows that has really enhanced productivity. It also gives people a little bit more personal freedom. They're able to work, but they're also able to manage other aspects of their life better. Psychologists say that it's been known to reduce stress, even though you might have the same workload. You're working in your home environment 2 days and then at the office 3 days. So I would embrace that. I would have an intentional employee recognition and appreciation for my team and for my organization if I had to do it all over again. And I'm not just talking about the once a year annual staff appreciation. People see right through that. That's not the solution to this. I think you have to find intentional ways throughout the year to show your employees that they're appreciated. It's just as simple as you have an employee that does a good job, you call it out. You call it out in staff meeting. You call it out in those one-on-ones and let them know, hey, I saw what you did. I saw you going above board. I saw you treating that customer in the way they need to be treated. I saw you produce something that was very, very difficult to achieve.
I want to get into your book, Burnout Pains. Mary M. wrote this in her review. This book is so good that I read it in a day and am validated on self-care routines I'm already doing, and I'm encouraged to add a few more. I want to ask you, what other types of feedback did you get once people started reading this book?
They said it feels like they're sitting in a living room with me. The book is so conversational. They said it feels like you're in the living room with me, just having a conversation about burnout. People like the fact that I balance it with theory, statistics, research, but there's also a lot of practical tips on how to prevent burnout, how to recover from burnout, how to recognize the signs of burnout. But I think what people really like is I weave my story throughout the book. I think what that does, it gives the book credibility. I'm not this author who's just writing a book on something that I've researched. I've actually been through it. And I think my story gives people hope because, TJ, let's face it, man, I was in chronic burnout and I pulled through it. I recovered. And today I'm not just recovered, I'm thriving. So think about this guy went from chronic burnout to where I'm at today. And somebody in burnout, they feel hopeless. And if they read my story, they're going to go, hey, if Reggie Thomas can come out of it, I can do the same thing. So I'm going to read his book and see how he did it. So that's some of the feedback I've gotten back from people that have read it.
There's this saying that you're the most qualified to help the person you used to be. And this makes me think of that because the books where the authors have actually lived what it was like, they felt all of that. It's not some abstract theory that they're studying for only sociological purposes. Several authors have mailed me signed copies of their books, and I have noticed that with these types that are meant to be used for practically improving someone's life experience, it's better to have them be 100, 150, 200 pages. Because this material, it's different than fiction where you're trying to get immersed and escape into another story. With these types of books, you're trying to give them things that are actionable. It's difficult to even apply all of the things in these types of books. That's why it can often take several weekends to get through it because you're like, okay, I'm relating to it, but how do I actually apply this? So one skill that you teach people how to master is called identify the trigger. Can you explain more about this?
A trigger can be a person. It could be an event. It could be something that's verbal. You probably don't see this. A lot of people don't pick up on this because I'm really calm and I'm a calm person today. But about 20 years ago, TJ, I had an anger issue. I didn't like it. I didn't like myself because of it, because it would show up in some of the strangest places. It sabotaged my relationships at times. It sabotaged my leadership. I didn't like it, but it almost felt like I didn't have control. And the reason I couldn't manage it is I was trying to manage the symptom, the behavior itself. It wasn't until I understood this idea of triggers where I was able to learn to manage my temper. The trigger was my father. My father was a harsh man. He was very critical. He was negative. He was verbally abusive. And I had to deal with that. My brothers and I all had to deal with that as we were growing up. We repressed a lot of what we felt because we were not allowed to express ourselves. But when I grew up and had some freedom, I think that's where the anger came out. So anybody that treated me like my dad or looked like my dad or behaved like my dad, that was a trigger for me. So once I recognized the trigger, I was able to navigate, manage, and change the behavior.
One of the elements behind anger and the reason it comes out is a sense of feeling powerlessness. And the anger is a way of trying to regain some control over how we're being treated, over what's happening around us. It often is a feeling of, okay, I'm losing my power. And it can sort of build up that feeling of, so now I'm out of control. And the only way to get it back, but it's all quite subconscious, is to release the anger, which is a way of getting attention and getting people to realize, like, I will not be subjected to this anymore, no matter what it is. I want to restate that you have ran 44 marathons and 6 ultra marathons. You've also ran the Boston Marathon 12 times. So I'm just so curious, how has competing in these athletic challenges helped you with your own creative energy in your career now that you're doing speaking and you've written all these books?
It plays into my quality of life. It's part of my life balance. I've also met some of my best friends through running. So it's elevated my social life. My wife and I, we use these marathons as an opportunity to travel. In fact, one thing you probably don't know is over the last 2 years, I started running international marathons. I've run all the major marathons, a lot of the major marathons in the United States. But back in 2024, we went to Berlin, Germany. I'd never been to Germany before. I ran the Berlin Marathon. Last year, I went to Sydney, Australia, and ran the Sydney Marathon. Next year, I'm going to be running the London Marathon. So we turned that into a vacation. It's an opportunity. So running is bigger than just running. It's an experience. I mean, there's physical fitness aspect to it, but there's a social aspect to it. And then there's really a family aspect to it as well. And so I get to be physically fit and and focus on the quality of life all at the same time with the running.
And how long before a marathon, no matter where it is, whether nationally or internationally, do you start preparing conditioning and your stamina and all of those things?
Typical training program, TJ, is going to be anywhere from 14 to 20 weeks. So back when I was running 4 marathons a year, I don't do that many a year now. I do usually about 2 a year now because I'm older and I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I want to preserve my body. But I was doing 4 to 5 marathons a year. That would mean that I'd run a marathon and then jump back into training. I was conditioned all the time. So it's not like a first-time marathoner who's never run before. They have to get conditioned. But typically, a training program, if you do it right, it's going to be 14 to 20 weeks.
One of the things that I've noticed with running conditioning is you have to get used to the breathing. It's not an automatic thing to just be able to have your lung and breath support for that long if you haven't conditioned yourself on, because some people will pass out. If they just go from they don't really walk or run in their day-to-day life, and then they just are told to sprint for several blocks. Some people actually end up passing out from that because their lungs are not conditioned to get enough oxygen into the blood. They're not breathing enough. They're sort of hyperventilating. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any places that you've been able to travel that were the most surprising to you?
Sydney, Australia last year. I was amazed at just how beautiful that country was. In fact, that was my first time to actually be on that continent. I mean, Australia is not just another country, it's another continent. We got to go to the Sydney Opera House. We saw the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We went to the Blue Mountains. And honestly, I tell you, here's what surprised me, TJ. I've never been anywhere nationally or internationally where I've said, because I love California, been in California for 30 years. I love California. But that was the first time in 30 years I actually made this statement. I could move here. That surprised me. The people are friendly. It's beautiful. It's safe. It's clean. Had a great time. Yeah. That's one of those places I could actually uproot from California and go and settle down. So I guess that was surprising.
I've watched the Australia version of Shark Tank a lot, and it gives me some insight into the way that they view the United States as far as product marketability. For them, it's a major manufacturing win to get their items not just sold locally in Australia, but to get them sold in the US in retail or in Europe or other countries. So it's just interesting how the US is perceived as this sort of like financial gold mine for entrepreneurs that are trying to make it with investments. I want to get into some of the workshops that you facilitate with companies and organizations. So how do you help team members and employees move out of burnout into performance that's more sustainable for their energy long term?
One of the things that I do is I have a package where I'll go in, and it's usually 3 months. I'll go in once a month and do a 2-hour workshop. Between the workshops, which is 4 weeks, I will take individual employees and coach them one-on-one if they're in burnout. Some of them, they want that hour every month because they want to stop the slide. They want to prevent burnout. Some are already in burnout and they want to know how to get out of it. But I do a 2-hour workshop that's informational, educational, practical. We go over some concepts, some strategies. After the workshop, I take the next month and coach a few people one-on-one, which is where the deep work really happens. Then I go back to the company and deal with another topic related to burnout. And again, take those same people. Sometimes there are additional people that want my time. And so I do that. It's a 3-month package that I have with companies and organizations.
One of the times that I was dealing with burnout was working day shoots and night shoots for the film industry, where they do 6 days of day shoots and then you're switched to 6 days of night shoots. And sometimes it alternates like that for weeks. I call it going into vampire mode because you have to have blackout curtains so you can sleep during the day. But what it did to me and many others is it kind of makes you like deliriously exhausted, where your circadian rhythms and your sleep cycles, your brain states are all getting mixed up. It's like giving yourself jet lag every single week. It's almost like a cloud that just kind of doesn't stop. No matter how well you eat or take a nap or whatever, people always say like, oh, it's because you're eating carbs. Like they give you some BS reason how to fix it,
Yeah.
When you're in these workshops, are you doing Q&As where people actually are able to tell some of their personal stories of how it's affected them?
Throughout the workshops, I have interactive activities. One of my favorite activities is I will create a scenario or I'll put a question out there and I get people in triads, groups of 3 to process, what they've heard. So I weave those kind of things throughout the seminar. Then at the very end, I like to allow 15 minutes or so just for open-ended questions. So throughout the workshop, what happens is I have targeted exercises that really align with the content that I'm teaching. And you get people in groups and they're able to process the information. But at the end, it's just open-ended question and answer time.
And when they're in these small groups, what are some of the questions that you're trying to spark their discussions with?
I try to deal with the affective. There's the cognitive, and then there's psychomotor, and then there's affective, Bloom's taxonomy. What I try to do is I try to get them to talk about where they're at. I try to get them to talk about their feelings. And that's hard for a lot of people. That's hard for men, especially. And it's also hard for high level professionals because they're used to dealing with the cognitive all the time, facts, data, research. But in these seminars, I want you to dig deep in your heart. And so they are more affective questions. Deep personal questions to make you reflect on where you're at and where you need to go. And that's how you bring about change and transformation.
I'm sure there's many times where you have people at different hierarchy in the company are getting to meet each other, speak to each other for sometimes the first time.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do, TJ, is whenever I have a question out there that's very personal and maybe a little bit more vulnerable, I will go first. I don't necessarily sit in a group, but I'll say, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to get in groups of 3, and I want you to address this issue in your life. I will model it for them. And it's not just making up a mock scenario. It's something that's really deep and personal in my life that I'm struggling with. What that does is that creates psychological safety. It creates that sense of vulnerability. It gives people that impression, hey, this is a safe spot. If the speaker just put his crap out there, that I can share mine, So I model that and I start the conversation with a deep personal issue that I've struggled with and I'm getting over. I'm still struggling with, but just modeling psychological safety and vulnerability and transparency is where you get people to open up.
Yeah, it gives them more relatability to you rather than just, I'm the listener, you're the speaker. They start seeing you as human to human. One of the goals that you've written with your workshops is to uncover a path forward, one that includes rest, clarity, and a renewed sense of purpose. So to hire Dr. Thomas for a workshop or keynote speech at conferences and seminars, go to peakpotential.com, PEAKE potential.com. And to contact Dr. Thomas directly, search Dr. Reggie Thomas on LinkedIn or send him a message directly through his website.
Both books that I've published are on Amazon. The first book I wrote was called Burnout Pains, which is a management book on how to deal with employee issues, how to navigate relational issues in the workplace. It's a leadership book. And then, of course, Burnout Pains that you've referenced throughout this podcast is also available on Amazon.
Reggie, thanks so much for joining me for today's episode.
Thanks for having me, TJ. It was great.
To hear more experts share their story, subscribe to the TJ Moore Podcast on YouTube and follow this show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to listen anywhere you go. Like and comment on this video if you found today's conversation valuable, and share this episode with someone in your life. I'll see you next week.